Welcome back to another episode of Reading Between the Wines. I'm your hostess, Winona Glass.
And I'm your co-host, Keegan Moore.
We are a podcast about books and wine. Perhaps you need a little bit of more information about a book as you're headed to book club. And then on the way home, we're going to make you a more educated wine buyer. So today's book is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And this book came out in September of 2020. And this book was hilarious because it is octogenarians who live in a retirement home who've decided that they're bored and want to solve murders.
Great group of friends hanging out in the retirement village, you know?
I mean, I feel like I want to have this much ambition when I'm in my 80s. And they get their name, the Thursday Murder Club, because they meet in the Jigsaw room, which is the only room that's available, and it's not available on any day but Thursday. So thus they became the Thursday Murder Club. Originally, they get together because they're looking for some murders that have happened, and they decided they're going to solve cold cases for the police because the police need help in solving murders.
Especially from amateurs.
What better way to do it than with a bunch of people who have no experience but a lot of time on their hands?
Yeah, time is important.
And so we have four friends that get together. It's kind of like 4.5, right? I mean, because we have Elizabeth, who's definitely the ringleader of this group. And then we have Ron, Ibrahim, and Joyce. And Joyce is a last minute add to the group because Penny, who is kind of the half member of the group, has fully succumbed to dementia. But Penny was a detective. So of everyone, she has the most creds. Well, maybe. Elizabeth, we don't know. We don't really know what she did. She can't talk about it. It was very important work, though, but
maybe involved the government, maybe didn't.
Right. But so we don't know if Elizabeth is the most qualified or if Penny is the most qualified. But Joyce got to be in the group because Penny was not able to join anymore. And so they're all in this retirement village called Cooper's Chase. And it used to be a covenant by the Sisters of the Holy Church. But now it's owned by this guy who's super shady, like tracksuit, slicked hair. Definitely not a guy that you can trust or want to cross either way. And his name is Ian, and he's an unlikable man just in general. And he is developing the retirement village. He's expanding it, the retirement village, along with his builder, Tony Curran. And Ian wants to purchase some more land, but the owner of it, Gordon Playfair, doesn't want to sell. He's not ready to sell. He's like, I don't know what your problem is. I don't like you. I don't want to sell to you. But Ian is adamant that he's going to expand the retirement village. And it all centers around this cemetery that's like up on the hill. And apparently some shady stuff has gone down in this cemetery over the years. And that's kind of what evolves during the book, is that everything comes back to the cemetery. I had no idea. Again, another book where I had to read the ending like twice because at the end of it, I was like, wait,
what?
How many people have something that happened at the cemetery? So we're giving away a little bit of it. But again, the cemetery is a quintessential part. It's called the Garden of Eternal Rest, which
lovely
is like a classy name for a cemetery, but still, I don't know. So Ian gets mad at Tony. So Ian's the owner of the land and Tony is the builder, and they have a falling out. He fires Tony and he hires Bogdan Jankowski to come in and take Tony's place. Well, later that day, Tony winds up dead. Everybody's like, Tony wasn't a great guy, but he's not really someone who you thought would get murdered in this. He's just kind of like Tony Soprano. That's kind of what I saw when they were describing Tony.
Yeah, I could see that.
I guess the name too, Tony Soprano, Tony Curran. But
it's a Tony.
Yeah, exactly. So the next day, the Thursday Murder Club is like, we have a job to do. This has happened on our soil.
We've got a fresh murder.
Right? Forget the cold cases, everyone. We have a fresh murder on our hands. It happened on our watch, and we are going to help the police. And what's really funny is that there was a constable who had come to talk to them about home security named Donna.
They had to go to a seminar.
Yeah, they went to a seminar on home security, which I thought was hilarious because they live at a retirement home. So they don't control the security I mean, I guess they control the security for their little apartments, but like, so I thought that was just hilarious. Well, the Thursday Murder Club decides that they love her and that they want her to be involved in this case. So these people, 2 women, 2 men, start scheming from the beginning. And it's hilarious because Elizabeth goes on a outing for the retirement community, and she's supposed to be going shopping. Instead, she diverts and goes over to the police department and says her purse got stolen and that she's so distraught and she's crying. Like there's this whole scene. And then a guy comes out to take her statement. She's like, no, I can only speak to a female. I can't speak to a male. So Donna comes out and Donna's like, what is going on? She's like, okay, just kidding. Didn't get my purse stolen, but we want you to be on this case. And she's like, what are you talking about? There's a very capable detective who's already been assigned to this case. And she's like, oh no, Abraham and Ron are on it right now. And they were like, Donna's like, what? So they get Donna attached to the case because Ron and Abraham are like, oh no, we don't trust you. We don't know who you are. Where's that woman who was in here the other day who was doing our security surveillance? We need her. Like, she's the only one we trust. I'm not talking to you. I don't know anything. So already from the beginning, I'm in love with these people because they're just who I want to be when
They're so
I'm
charming
80 years old.
and clever.
Right. And they
determined.
like to drink.
Yeah.
They often get together for the Thursday Murder Club and have a cocktail or two.
They were drinking often.
Very often.
Yes.
That retirement home was rocking. And so they kind of make a deal with Donna, like, hey, we got you on the case, so you have to share inside information with us. And we'll tell you what we find out. So Elizabeth gets her hands on all of Ian's financial documents and takes them to Joyce's daughter, Joanna, who works for a private equity firm. She works in some sort of finance. And they want her to take a look at them and find out kind of what is Ian up to? Like, why is he so passionate about trying to push this development forward? And Joanna discovers that when Tony died, he owned like 25% of the development. And all of that went to Ian whenever Tony died. So Ian is substantially richer than he was a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And so it's definitely a motive as to why to kill someone, right?
Definitely.
Then they go in and figure out that Ian could have made it to Tony's house from Cooper's Chase, like in the time period that he was missing from the development. So now they're hot to trot that Ian is the one who killed Tony. But there was a photo that was left whenever Tony died. There was a photo that was left of Tony and 2 other people. There was a boxer, Jason Ritchie, whose dad is Ron, who's part of the Thursday Murder Club. And then there was another guy, Bobby Tanner, who was a very well-known drug dealer. And so they're trying to figure out, they're at a table covered with cash. They're some unsavory people, and they're trying to figure out how this is involved, how the picture is involved with Ian and Tony, because Ian's not in the picture, but Tony and Jason and Bobby are all in the picture together. Now, we go back and Ian has decided he's moving forward with this project, even though he hasn't gotten the land from Gordon yet. But Ian has decided he's going to go ahead and move forward, and he is going to start digging up the graveyard at the Garden of Eternal Rest. And when the Cooper's Chase residents find out, they build a human wall in front of it.
Not doing it.
Right? And so the police get called. So Chris and Donna come out. They're like, y'all,
Staging
staging
a protest at the cemetery.
can't stop this. And they're like, oh, yes, we can. So they start to clear out. Father Mackey shows up. Ian loses his temper and he shoves Father Mackey. Oh, no, you didn't. You did not just shove the priest. So Kristen tells Ian, you got to get out of here. But then as Ian's like walking to his car, he dies. Drops dead. Boom. What the heck? So they discover that Ian was injected with fentanyl, and he had to be injected by someone who was at the
Pretty
protest.
recently.
Right.
Yeah.
So now your suspect pool has narrowed significantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many people, so many moving parts. And all of them are at least 80, with the exception of Father Mackey, right? Because Ian was the youngest person there, other than the two detectives. Pretty sure they didn't kill him. So it's like, oh, what? Some feisty people.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're trying to figure out what happened with Ian, we're going back to Tony's murder. And Tony had 3 calls that came from a number, but Donna recognizes it. And it's Jason's number. Jason, the former boxer whose dad, Ron, is part of the Thursday Murder Club. I'm just going to keep reiterating that because there's a lot of like circular references here. And Donna's like, I know this number. So they go and they interrogate Jason. And Jason's like, I'm not talking. I'm not going to say anything to you. You can't make me talk. But then right after that, Jason goes to this gastropub that used to be have a different name. And that's when they realized that it was where the photo was taken. So Jason's kind of gone back to where the photo was taken. And they figure out that the photo was taken by a guy who has the best name in the entire book. His name is Turkish Gianni, which I find hilarious because he's from Cyprus. He's not from Turkey. So Turkish Gianni used to be the 4th member of their gang, and he did some unsavory things. There was a murder.
No.
I know. With a name like Turkish Gianni, of course you're going to grow up and be a priest. He may have done some things that were less than savory. Tony had shot a drug dealer. They all witnessed it. There was another person who witnessed it who was a taxi driver. Gianni was, tasked
cleanup crew.
with cleaning up the loose ends. And then Gianni disappeared right after that. And then Bobby disappeared as well. Everybody went clean after that. And nobody's ever seen Bobby or Gianni since then. So we're trying to figure out how this photo relates to Tony. And now Jason's back in the picture. So everybody's kind of staring at Jason because you're the only one in the picture that's still alive, technically.
Right.
As far as we know. So going back to the cemetery, in the cemetery, the new construction foreman, Bogdan, tells Elizabeth, hey, we have an extra skeleton that we found when we were digging up the cemetery. Like there was a one in the coffin and then there was one outside of the coffin. And it's a little odd. And Elizabeth, being as resourceful as she is like, hey, I got a guy. He's going to come and he's going to investigate that. We're going to figure out what's going on. And he reports back that they died in the 70s, like that the skeletons are from the 70s. This is not recent, but it could have been the reason that someone wanted the cemetery not to be
disturbed.
Disturbed, right.
Yeah.
Come to find out, there's a lot of people who didn't want that cemetery to be disturbed for a lot of reasons. Well, Elizabeth is not going to rest on her laurels. And so now she's determined more than ever. So she tracks down Bobby. And through the sleuthiness and undetermined job that only Elizabeth can tell you about, she finds Bobby in London. And he owns a florist shop. Isn't that where all ex-drug dealers go to do?
It's a storefront. Come on.
Well,
sure.
And you find out that that's actually how he was moving drugs, was on the floral trucks. And he bought the floral shop as a front. But then when everything went down with this whole gang that he was a part of with Tony and crew, he decided to go straight and he changes his name. And now his name's Peter Ward. And he's like, I'm on the straight and narrow now. I don't have anything to do with drugs. I'm not a part of it. I don't know why Jason is back. I don't know what happened to Gianni. But I can tell you that he made off with $100,000 of Tony's money whenever he left. And Tony wasn't too happy about it, which I can understand.
Yeah, I'd be mad too. Even if it was dirty money.
Right.
Well.
So Chris, at the same time, Chris is our detective, the one who's actually qualified to track down all of these leads as far as we know.
The actual detective.
Uh-huh. So he decides that he's going to track down Gianni's family in Cyprus. And so he goes back. His dad owns a gym there. His name is Kostas Gundas, which I just thought was a great name as well.
Yes.
I mean, these guys have fantastic names. I want to be called Turkish Gianni.
I don't know. Do you really?
No, I don't want to be Turkish Gianni. He's got some bad blood, but that's a fantastic name, though.
I want to know and be on the good side of a Turkish Gianni.
Right? Exactly. I want to have a Turkish Gianni as
in my pocket.
as
Yeah.
my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I can call and be like, I need help. And they're like, I'm on it. But his dad's like, I don't know anything. His dad's still very much not out of the business. And he's like, I don't know anything. I don't want to know anything. Gianni left. We don't know more than that. So Chris kind of leaves. He doesn't have any more answers than he did when he got there. What I find is hilarious is that as he is leaving Cyprus at the airport, who does he run into but Ron and Ibrahim?
Ibrahim.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't they be at the airport in Cyprus? Because, that's
Nothing but time.
right. And apparently some money.
Yes.
So he's like, hey, you know what? Let's all go back. I think that you guys need to be at Cooper's Chase. And so they decide they're going to go and question Bernard, who spends a lot of time on the bench outside of the
Cemetery.
Garden of Eternal Rest. And Bernard's a quiet guy, very introverted. And it comes to pass that when they're questioning him, that he breaks down. He's like, look, my wife died. I went to go put her ashes or put them in a canister, put them temporarily in the ground until she could be buried. And then I went back and they had built this bench over where I put her ashes. So I sit on the bench because I miss my wife. And in telling them all of this, Bernard decides he's going to kill himself. And so that was a very sad part of the story. Like he just kind of decides after that, writes the letter, like, I'm done. I want to go see my wife again. And so it was a very little tangent there, but it was a very sweet tangent that why Bernard was spending so much time sitting on that bench just because he missed his wife and he knew that she was right there with him. And then again, we've talked about Father Mackey. And Father Mackey, we find out, isn't really a priest.
Father is loose term.
He was a doctor. And then they were like, oh, well, the convent needed some people who could do some priestly duties. I guess as the only male around. He's like, I can do that.
Close enough.
So he's like, I can take confession. That's cool. Like, I can issue the sacraments and some sermons. So he kind of makes himself the priest, which I didn't know you could do that. And so while he's doing that, he falls in love with one of the nuns who's there. And she unexpectedly kills herself. And so Father Mackey now is like, I'm just going to stay here because I miss her and I don't know what happened. And then he finds out she was pregnant. So that was why she killed herself. And again, very sad, but she was buried in the cemetery. So we got, again, lots of things that center around the Garden of Eternal Rest. Then we find out that Cooper's Chase has been sold to a company called Bramley Holdings. It's like, whoa. Why does that sound so familiar? It sounds familiar. Nobody can really put their finger on why. And now Gordon has decided that he wants to sell land to Bramley Holdings as well. And they're all kind of like, why? And he says, well, I just never really liked Ian. I always thought he was a swindler and a con man. And now I'm thinking about joining you guys at Cooper's Chase. So it's like, wait, okay. So now there's this whole conspiracy that maybe Karen killed Ian to get her dad to sell the land. And that's quickly like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And so that one falls on the vine. But Karen says that she remembers that Penny's husband, now again, Penny has dementia, but that Penny's husband used to be her vet. And this comes into play later in the book. So now, fast forward, Elizabeth goes to talk to John, Penny's husband, and says, like, what, used to be a vet? And he's like, oh, yeah, well, Penny and I have lived here since the 70s. Oh, you have? Interesting. Okay. So then he says, yeah. And by the way, like, I just want you to know that I killed Ian. Like, totally casual. Oh, yeah. Because I was a vet, I had access to fentanyl and I am skilled with a syringe.
Yeah.
And I totally shot him up with some fentanyl as he was walking by. Didn't even know. I was like, wait, what? I really want to know what Elizabeth did. I wonder if she was an interrogator or something. So she has this way of like getting people to talk to her, even though they don't even know that they're confessing. But he was talking about how before Penny's dementia had set in, that she worked on a case with a gentleman named Peter Weber who had killed his girlfriend and gotten away with it.
Yeah.
Penny was pretty upset about that, went a little vigilante on it. And perhaps that's the extra skeleton that's in the cemetery.
Yeah.
So we have like 3 potential grave people who could be in the grave. We don't know who it is yet. But Elizabeth says, look, John, I have a lot of respect for you, but I got to turn you in anyway. So prepare that tomorrow you're going to go to jail. You're at least going to be arrested for the murder of Ian. And I think that Elizabeth knew what was going to happen when she left that room that day. And it's exactly what happens. John kills Penny and then himself. And so we get a lot of people who've died in this book.
A lot of murder in the murder club.
Right? I mean, I think they like instigate murder more than solve it. I feel like they've caused more deaths than they've actually solved, and solving these
definitely.
Deaths. Yeah. So again, Bogdan is trying to befriend everybody because he knows that these Thursday Murder Club, they're asking a lot of questions, they're poking around. So he goes and he's playing chess with Elizabeth's husband, Stephen, because he's kind of on
the edge.
Yeah, he's not quite fully into dementia, but he's definitely teetering and doesn't know a lot of things. And so they're playing chess together. And he just kind of tells him, oh, by the way,
it was me.
I killed Tony.
I actually killed Tony.
Right. Because I didn't like him.
And Gianni.
Well, yeah. I mean, why not? Let's go back there and just confess everything. Because he was the sole witness to the shooting. And it was his best friend who was the taxi driver that Gianni killed. So Bogdan took revenge. A lot of revenge killing in this book, too. So he decided, like, I wanted to eliminate Gianni, took that opportunity, and then he bided his time until he took out Tony for like 30 years.
Just waiting for the right time, you know?
Yeah. Well, then Tony asked him to come over and put in some security equipment at his house. And he's like, now's my opportunity because I installed all this equipment. I know how to evade it all. And so he's the one who is actually putting the photos. He's the one who put the photo by Tony, and he's the one who mailed one to Jason just to let him know, like, I'm coming for you, friend. But the police don't know that. The police don't know that Bogdan did this.
Right.
And so there's still an international warrant out for Gianni's arrest.
Yeah.
Even though they're never going to find him. They still don't know who killed Tony. We still don't exactly know who the skeleton is in the cemetery because we have 3 viable suspects that it could be. We just know it's happened in the 70s. And now Bramley's Holdings, they realize Joanna is the one who purchased the Cooper's Chase. And that's Joyce's daughter. So now Joyce's daughter's running the joint. And she's made the commitment that the Garden of Eternal Rest will never be disturbed. Yeah. And if she should sell it in the future, which they're prone to do because it's an investment holding company, that they'll make precautions and covenants to make sure that it doesn't get disturbed in the future. Yes. But my Lord. But then it ends with Elizabeth putting a note under Joyce's door that says, we're still meeting this Thursday, right? So more to come.
More to come, man.
And they've made this into a series. The Thursday Murder Club is now a series and it's a pretty star-studded cast. I'm a little stoked for it. So that'll be great.
Is that out yet?
So it's coming out on Netflix. It looks like, man, there's all kinds of people who are going to be in it. Steven Spielberg is producing it. We've got Pierce Brosnan. We've got Helen Mirren, Sir Ben Kingsley. So it's a pretty, I mean, it's a good cast of people who are definitely going to bring this book to life.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So they drink a lot in this book. So Keegan, what do you think we should drink today?
Well, they drink, cocktails,
Mm-hmm.
but Joyce offers some sherry. Would you
Okay.
like some sherry? She says it's only Sainsbury's, but it's Taste the Difference, which is apparently, a chain, but Taste the Difference kind of was relaunched in 2010. And so it's revamped. Good stuff.
I don't think I've ever had sherry before.
Never?
No, I think this will be. We've talked about it a little bit, like in fortified wines and stuff, but
true.
we've never tasted it. So I'm excited to have my first drops of sherry.
Excellent. We're going to have a dry sherry today in the Fino style.
Fantastic. So we're going to take a little break. Keegan's going to pour us some lovely sherry, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. All right, Keegan, tell us more about sherry.
So just some general facts to start off with. This
Okay.
is a fortified wine. As you mentioned, the alcohol range is typically between 15 and 22%.
Yowza.
So they add a neutral grape spirit after fermentation,
Mm-hmm.
which separates it from port, which is added during.
Oh, okay.
And most sherries are systematically exposed to oxygen. So it is an oxidative process.
So it's intentional when they do it.
It is
that what-
intentional.
okay.
It is very labor intensive. This is like champagne about the process
Mhm.
and not the grapes. There are multiple different styles that range from bone dry to very sweet.
Okay.
99% do not carry a vintage. This is all about the blending.
Okay.
Blending. And this region is also known for food and tapas, which are little nibbles or small dishes. And we'll talk about the Sherry Triangle and the vineyards kind of spread between 3 cities.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get overwhelmed. There's a word for everything.
Oh, boy.
A word for everything. But here we go. History, I will just say that sherry was the first Dominación de Origen in Spain, and it was designated in 1933.
So it's been around a while.
Been around quite a bit. So for geography, we are in the very south of Spain. This is the land along the sea in the Andalusia province.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sherry Triangle includes 3 cities:
Mm-hmm.
Jerez de la Frontera, Puerto de Santa Maria, and Sanlúcar. The vineyards are grown between these cities, and then the wine is matured in the towns.
Interesting.
As we are in the south of Spain, it is hot and sunny here, still Mediterranean climate, but some vineyards closer to the coast benefit from the poniente, which is a cool, humid, westerly wind.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is also the levante, which is a hot and drying wind that blows from the east. Often they do get actually a decent amount of rainfall, but it's often falls out of the growing season.
Oh, really?
There is a specific soil here called Albariza.
Mm-hmm.
So this region was covered by the sea a millennia ago, but this Albariza soil is white and crumbly and very high in chalk.
Oh.
So full of marine sediments,
Mm-hmm.
some old life from the sea, and it's often mixed in with chalky calcium carbonates, which include limestone. So it drains well, which is always a good thing, but it can also hold water well. Another unique aspect of the soil is that it forms a hard crust on the top,
Really?
which helps to prevent evaporation. Briefly, want to talk about the grapes.
Okay.
All white grapes are going into sherry. Almost 95% of sherry made is from the Palomino grape or
Okay.
Palomino Fino. It's
Mhm.
the main one. It's pretty low in acid, It's pretty high in yielding. It's pretty neutral in flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it great to do sherry process too. So there's also Pedro Jimenez, also known as PX. It's pretty rare.
And that's a grape?
It's a grape.
Okay.
It's also a sherry style.
Oh.
Not to be confusing at all.
Okay.
It is pretty thin skinned, which makes it ideally suited to be sun dried. So all PX wine is made into a dessert style of sherry. It's very dark and very luscious. And then there's a little bit of Moscatel Bianco, which is also known as Muscat of Alexandria, and it's made into a wine all on its own. Occasionally used for blending, but pretty rare. This is all about the process.
Mm-hmm.
So grapes are harvested and taken to press as quickly as possible because we're in a hot region. Fermentation typically in stainless steel. The base wine is typically dry at about 11 to 12% alcohol, except for the sweet wines. And the grapes are sun-dried, which concentrates their sugar levels because water evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it stops, the must is fortified to 17% alcohol. So after fermentation
Mm-hmm.
in the fall, they classify all the grapes
Mm-hmm.
and everybody gets into two camps. So you're either going to go in the biological stage or the oxidative stage. So the biological stage is typically the lighter, paler wines with
Mhm.
more finesse.
Okay.
And they often come from cooler climates along the coast. And then the other side is the oxidative side. And they're typically the darker, richer, heavier wines, often from warmer vineyards inland. And then once they're classified, they get fortified with 96% ABV neutral spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And they rest for a minimum of few months. And the word for this is the sobretabla. And it's the stage where they're resting. So
Sounds like a fun stage.
it's where you're being judged, to figure out your life path,
Right.
essentially. So,
Yeah.
wines for biological aging are fortified to between 15 to 15.5%.
Mm-hmm.
This is Fino, Manzanilla, Amontillado, Palo Cortado, and then the lesser categories are pale cream and medium, technically also fit into this. So the biological aging ones are at that 15 to 15.5%,
Mhm.
which is the ideal strength for floor, which translates to flour. This is a foamy, waxy film layer of multiple strains of yellow white yeasts,
Mm-hmm.
and they develop and form a thick layer on the surface of the wine. So floor is a family of 4 complex and wild strains of Saccharomyces yeasts. They bloom spontaneously in Jerez's air, but they will quickly mutate or die if you take them to other parts of the world. So this is part of the reason why sherry is so unique, and you pretty much can't make true sherry anywhere else in the world. Regulations are not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like it's just in that climate that all of this works together.
These particular, yeah, right.
Interesting. Okay.
So floor feeds off alcohol along with other nutrients and oxygen, and which produces CO2 and acetaldehyde. And that's what gives sherry its unique flavor. And you'll definitely smell that wafting in your nose off the glass right now.
I can smell it sitting a few feet away from it.
Pretty unique.
It's a very strong scent.
Yes. So floor, like me and some people I know, are pretty picky,
Okay.
and they require precise levels of alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
temperature, and humidity to thrive. So the alcohol has to stay under 15.5%, has to be cool to moderate temperature, and it has to have a relatively high humidity. So the floor will grow vigorously in the spring and fall, and then it dies back in the winter and summer. Wines on the oxidative side in the cellars rarely are older than 3 or 4 years old.
Really?
After 3 or 4 years, the nutrient levels aren't high enough for them to survive, and so they kind of die off. So the sobretabla is important for these style of wines, and if the floor does not develop,
Mm-hmm.
then they'll refortify the wine and they'll send it for oxidative aging, or they just reject it altogether.
No soup for you.
Yeah, just go figure out, go be somewhere else. So
Go be part of a blend.
yeah. And then there's also wines on the other side for oxidative aging. So these are fortified to 17% ABV, and then floor will be dead at this high of alcohol. The styles that go through oxidative aging are Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, Amontillado, Palo Cortado, and Cream, technically. Sherries can be matured oxidatively for upwards of 30 years, typically with alcohol levels rising to around 22% as they're losing water, evaporating over time. Next, we need to talk about the famous Solera system.
Ooh.
This is another thing that makes sherry unique and unlike any other wine. So typically, this takes place in sherry bodegas. These bodegas have thick whitewashed walls, high ceilings, and windows that point toward the poniente, which are the cooling winds. And then often they have earth floors that are kept damp for humidity.
An earth floor, like in where it's being.
Where the sherry is aging.
Okay. So the cellar or whatever has a damp earth floor to keep the moisture.
It's a bodega, though.
Oh, bodega. Sorry.
Yeah. But some modern ones are air conditioned.
Okay.
So then wine is progressively blended and aged in a network of old barrels, which are called botas, aka butts. That's what they call them. These are 600-liter American oak barrels, and they are always painted matte black. They're filled around 3/4 to 5/6 full for the biological aging. This is called dos puntos, which translates to 2 fists of air. So this gives the floor easy access to oxygen, and also importantly, it protects the wine underneath the floor from oxidation.
Okay.
And it's kind of a misconception, but a lot of people will tell you to think of a hypothetical pyramid for the Solera system. But it's not really how it works out in real life, because there may be hundreds or even thousands of barrels in a given row. Generally, these are stacked 3 or 4 rows high, right on top of each other. And typically a criadera is together, but not stacked literally like a pyramid. But the youngest wine, where wine is added at the top, and then the oldest wine is at the theoretical bottom.
Okay.
The bottom row is also called the Solera row or level, and that's where you draw the wine from when you're making the wine.
So like when you're pulling it out of the tank, or out of the barrel, just to taste it or to check on it, you're going from that bottom row.
Well, you're tasting all the time from all the levels. And honestly, they draw from all the barrels from the same criadera and put it into a tank and blend that.
Oh, okay.
And then go on to the next process. So you don't. More blending. It's all about the blendings.
It's all about the blend.
So then the first row up from the first criadera, it's also called the nursery. It's the second oldest wine. And then the second row up is the second criadera, and so on and so forth. And then they use the sobre tabla to fill the top criadera as you empty from below. Then there's a rociador, another term. It's a device that used to draw the sherry out of the barrels. And this is used to minimize the disturbance of yeast, because you want to go in underneath the floor, but you also don't want to disturb the leaves and everything that's settled in the bottoms to get like right there in the middle. Each Solera is separate for each style of sherry. So those are all kept separate. And that may contain up to 14 rows, and it has to contain at least 3. But like I said, it's not a literal pyramid, so you're not going to have 14 barrels high.
Right.
Because that would be a disaster. And then sometimes the same criadera from the same Solera system is stored in separate buildings in case of disaster, in case something crazy happens. So you don't lose a whole something
ecosystem
all in one thing. Exactly. The barrels are almost never fully emptied. And so on average, they're 100 years old.
Wow.
And many sherry bodegas have barrels that average 200 years old.
That's crazy. This is like during COVID, it was really big to do the sourdough starter. Like this is what this reminds me of. It's like
they've had it growing there
right for a long time.
This
is a 200-year-old sherry.
Yeah. So sherry is bottled on demand. Like I said, it's not really a vintage thing, but they will bottle around 2 to 6 times a year typically. And it has to be aged a minimum of 2 years, but it's often aged much more than that. When I was initially studying sherry, this chart and the WSET book was very helpful for me. And it shows how you go from a Fino to an Amontillado, and what's a Palo Cortado, and what's the difference between a cream and an Oloroso. And so you can kind of see from the chart there are main styles, but then you can add sugar or add Pedro Jimenez. And you can like go from taking an Oloroso and then add PX. Well, that's now a cream sherry. But PX, you see, is like very separate. It's like its own thing, it's its own sun dried grapes, and there's really nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for this part, I wanted to go through all the dry styles first. Since before I kind of mentioned whether they went through oxidative or biological. So the first one is Fino, and that's what we're drinking today.
So hang on. So you get to diverge in two different roads. So you're either going the oxidative path or the
Biological
path. Which one of those makes it dry?
There's some in both.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought when you said that you talked about the two divergent paths, I thought that it went dry or sweet.
No, and that's the confusing part. So before
color me confused.
I mentioned them as oxidative or biological, and some go through both.
Okay.
And some are dry and then sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this chart was super, super helpful to me. So since I listed them before in oxidative or biological, now we're going to go through all the dry styles together. So the first main one is Fino. This is biological aging only. As you can see in our glass, it's a pale lemon color typically. Heavy bready notes, that's from the floor. That's from the biological aging.
So it is like a sourdough starter.
Yeah. As I said,
we're going to have some bread.
It's in the yeast. It should be consumed as fresh as possible. So this is something that doesn't benefit from bottle aging. And we'll see our producer also listed the made on date or the ship date, but there is a date on there to let you know that this was bottled, less than a year ago. Always serve the Fino chilled, and it pairs well with almost all seafood, and it's a really good pairing with gazpacho, and it's often served as an aperitif. So this is where the tapas come in the region.
Okay.
So this would be great with like patatas bravas. They serve a traditional like tomato with bread and ham, but it's pan con tomate with jamon. But even like a bowl of almonds and a Fino sherry, as well as dates and nuts.
So if you're having some people over, to solve some murder, you could set out some nuts, some dates, and a little bit of sherry.
Have a little bit of Fino sherry.
Yeah.
So let's drink the wine and talk about the wine.
Okie dokie.
While we have a Fino. So the producer here we have is El Maestro Sierra.
Okay.
This is a Fino sherry.
It definitely, it's got some odor to it.
Yep. It's yeasty, y'all. So we're in Andalusia. They have a view of El Puerto de Santa Maria from the building. And they became the first and now still one of the few bodegas still run entirely by women.
Well, that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Are they in their 80s?
No. So it was run by Doña Pilar Pla Petrovarito from 1976 to 2020. And so she was amazing. And it's now run by Pilar's daughter and current owner, Dr. Carmen Borrego Pla, who's a historian. And it was originally founded in 1830 by a sherry barrel producer, which was Jose Antonio Sierra. And it's obviously still in the same family line today. Their cellar master and master blender, it's also another word, capataza, is Ana Cabrastrero. This wine is aged around 6 years in a Solera, and then they bottle it straight off the lees. And they are doing minimal filtering, and they said that all the sherries they produce are all in Rama, which is a just raw style. All of El Maestro Sierra's Soleras are 60 to 100 years old. And this is imported by De Mason Selections in the United States. So what'd you think of the wine?
I want to hear what you think of the wine first.
It's very different. It's very unlike anything else. It's a little bit salty.
I felt like I was eating a flower.
Yes, it can be quite floral. Not nutty though. Or kind of like that an oxidized apple.
Yeah, I didn't get any. I didn't get any nutty. It's just getting so much floral to me that it's overpowering everything
But not
else.
bready.
Maybe there's definitely some sort of aftertaste that I can't place my finger on.
Fino style is supposed to be great with little appetizers, little snacks. The next style is manzanilla. This is also undergoing biological aging only. Same for everything as Fino, except it is exclusively aged in Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which is on the coast, which makes it a little cooler, more humid, gives it a little more briny flavor and saltiness, and almost like an iodine-like sea spray aroma. And funny you say floral because there's also chamomile that grows all around Sanlúcar, and so that also shows up in the wine. Manzanilla is often good with shrimp, and somebody else recommended sushi or sashimi.
Well, that would sound really good right now.
Then there is Amontillado, which goes through biological aging. So this will be a little higher alcohol, typically aged 4 to 6 years, and then refortified to 17%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be darker in color. Anything going
Okay.
through that oxidative process is going to have a darker color. This is more amber topaz or brown. Some of them are like molasses.
Well, I was going to say, I had in my mind that sherry was closer to like a red. I had a red color, almost like grenadine. And then when you poured this, I was like, that is not what I expected.
So like I said, the base is all going to be white grapes for the most part. So Amontillado often has aromas of roasted hazelnuts, dried fruits, and it's pretty spicy.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be matured as long as an Oloroso, which we'll talk about next, and serve it at a cool room temperature. And this often pairs well with chicken, turkey, paella, which is a common dish in Spain, and meatballs.
Well, that sounds yummy.
Yeah. Then there's Oloroso, which is another oxidative aging only. It kind of translates to intensely aromatic. Oloroso is going to be brown in color. This is going to be a full-bodied sherry with flavors of toffee, leather, spice, and walnuts. Somebody said it was more nutty than nuts themselves. But this is a full-bodied, potent sherry. And it's often served with pork, duck, lamb, and beef. So there's a saying, and I don't know if it's like a Psalm thing or whatever, but if it swims, a fish, drink a Fino. If it flies, birds, drink an Amontillado. And if it runs, drink an Oloroso.
Okay. Well, that's a really good little handy tidbit there.
Thought you might find it funny.
I do.
Then we're going to get into a weird style. This is rare. We'll call it eccentric, like your weird Uncle Al or whatever.
Uncle Rico.
Uncle Rico. Palo Cortado. So it has the aromas of an Amontillado, but the body and richness of an Oloroso.
Oh, so it's like
It's a both these, yeah.
mix of everything.
In between. It goes through both aging
It's one that goes
processes.
both ways.
Yes, it does. And aging, it appears to be an Oloroso, but it develops more elegant style and flavor and a little bit more complexity. So they make it into this special category. But good with jamon is a good pairing. Kind of smells like roasted walnuts, dried leaves, fresh tobacco, and North African spices.
I can honestly tell you my palate is not refined enough to tell the difference between North and South African spices.
Well, they're just very exotic if you're not raised eating African spices. So they tend to hit harder. So I just think like more intensely aromatic for regular people.
Gotcha.
Then we'll talk about the sweet categories. These are going to be naturally sweet. So Pedro Jimenez is the big one. We just call it PX. This goes through oxidative aging only. This is that deep brown color. Can be like syrup-like or molasses-like. And this is the process that the grapes are dried on straw mats in the sun for about a week. Lusciously sweet. PX sherry can contain as much as 500 grams per liter of sugar.
Oh my days. That is like diabetes in a bottle.
Yes. So don't drink a lot of it.
Do you drink it straight or do you do something with it?
Both.
Okay.
So I'll definitely serve it cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's also served with hard cheese. It's also served over like vanilla ice cream.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
I was just thinking something that sweet. And I know that you always say that your food needs to be sweeter than your wine. That's like, I don't.
Where do you find that?
Ice cream would be about it. So that sounds like
you do the opposite game and pair it with hard cheese. But
yeah.
Yeah.
I
A lot
like
of people
that.
will pour it over vanilla ice cream
Yeah.
or just drink it straight. And it's about 3 times as sweet as Sauternes from France, which are already pretty sweet.
Mm.
Then there's Muscat. So it's just like PX, but it's made from Muscat grapes. But because of the grape, it retains that dried citrus peel flavor. Then there's sweetened styles, which aren't really a big thing in the United States.
Okay.
But the British love to drink sherry, and a lot of it became famous because they were sweet. It's still about half of sales are the sweet categories. So pale cream is biologically aged and then sweetened with RCGM, which is a lovely way of saying rectified concentrated grape must.
Yum.
It's, it's not white table sugar, but it is adding sweetener.
Mm-hmm.
There's also medium, which is an Amontillado added with some PX. So this is characteristics of both oxidative and biological aging since the base is Amontillado. Then there's cream, which is Oloroso with PX added, which is oxidative only. And this was originally created just for the British market. And apparently they would drink it in the harsh winters there.
Interesting.
On the sweeter side, this has at least 115 grams per liter of RS.
I just wouldn't think you would want something cold and sweet when it's cold outside.
If you're in a warm pub, maybe it doesn't matter.
Maybe.
I don't know. There is also aged sherry. It's a very small production, about 1%. Only Amontillado, Palo Cortado, Oloroso, and PX qualify for an age-indicated status. So there is VORS and VOS, which is Latin for Vinum Optimum Rare Signatum, or Very Old Rare Sherry. So VORS is average age blend of about 30 years old, and VOS is at least 20 years old. A couple other notes. I just want to say that cooking sherry is not sherry.
Okay, that's a good point.
It's just a cheap base wine, and they add salt and color and flavor that's artificial. On the other side of the spectrum is sherry vinegar. Is amazing. And it's aged and concentrated in old Soleras. And then as the wine we are drinking today is in Rama, is a raw style that's become more popular with the natural movement. It kind of translates to on the branch. There's little to no filtration, and it's often from like specially selected casks within the Solera system. And then just the note, you've never had sherry before today. Sherry was very, very popular. Kind of the golden age was between 1970 and 1985. But there's been a steady decline in sales of sherry around the world. There was a little spike. It's kind of trying to make a resurgence and come back. But, I mean, you're talking about going from 150 million liters in a year to just over 30 million in a year.
Wow.
And that's down like 80%.
That's
in
a pretty
30-year
significant
period.
drop.
So there's been a little resurgence in Spain, but everywhere else has kind of been steady declining sherry consumption.
Yeah.
And they also say because the sweeter styles are more popular and they're often drank by older people that might be in a retirement home, that population is dying off. And so sherry kind of needs to pivot. And so that's why I think the dry styles are, I mean, they're food friendly. They're certainly unique. And, you know, when in Rome, right? If you're in Spain and having tapas, like be sure to try some dry styles of sherry, especially Manzanilla is like the trendy style to have, if you will. These can be a little expensive. So we're drinking out of a half bottle, so 375 milliliters. And this was on the shelf for around $23 in the United States. So these can be pricey, but as I said, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time to make, but made with love and very unique
Mm-hmm.
and very specific to a region and unlike anything else.
Very much unlike anything else. Well, we read a great book today about 4 friends coming together to solve murders in London, and they drank a lot of sherry. And so we drank sherry, my first time ever drinking sherry. And in doing so, we've had a fun adventure. And so we thank you for coming along on this adventure with us. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, you can head over to our website at readingbetweenthewines.blog. We love our Patreon subscribers, and we're coming out with some great content we're going to dish on a lot of the books that didn't make the cut. And so if you want to hear more about that, head on over to Patreon and subscribe. But there's also other ways that you can help us out if you aren't able to become a Patreon subscriber.
Word of mouth always helps.
Always.
Tell a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a habit of scouting out people that are reading in public.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, what are they reading? What's trendy? What's happening?
Right.
Yes. Tell them about the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're drinking wine with friends and someone's a book lover in the group,
bring it up.
Let them know.
Yes.
You can also follow us on Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast platforms. And if you feel like supporting us, give us a 5-star review. It really helps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us on our adventure today. And until we meet again, always keep your glass half full. Cheers.